Well, I think with the big to-do about the Talbot Boys statue in Easton, I started thinking about the Civil War monument in Monument Plaza in Chestertown. Okay, what is the difference? And essentially, do the folks in Kent County, have anything to worry about in terms of people wanting to take down that monument or something like that? There are vast differences between the monuments. The one in Talbot, of course, has a statue. It has a statue of a Confederate soldier holding a Confederate flag, and it's on a granite base. In Chestertown, it's essentially the granite base. Now, the one in Talbot has just Confederate soldiers on it. All the names, I think there's, I'm going to say 94, but I might have the number wrong. In Chestertown, they have Confederate soldiers on one side and some Union soldiers on the other, and they list some of the officers and some of the more important family names, I'll say, and then there were so many privates, it says on the bottom. And so you see one difference between them is that the one in Easton, in front of the courthouse in Easton, is just Confederates. Okay, that's a problem right from the get-go. The one in Chestertown has both, so I guess you'd say Chestertown's off the hook, but not yet, not quite, because there's something substantial missing, and that's the inclusion of the 400 or so black soldiers that fought in the Civil War. Now, the black soldiers contributed a lot, and they had something else that they were doing that was rather important. Many of them were slaves, and they got their freedom by joining up to fight for the Union. And because they were slaves, of course, they were poor, and the enticement was new suit of clothes, 3 squares a day, pay, medical care, and so there was an enticement for, so ergo 400 black soldiers from Kent County. So now that monument was put there August 1917. It was dedicated, and the man behind it was Judge James Alfred Pearce. Now, he was born about 1840, just a frame of reference, and his father was a prominent senator. In fact, his father had even considered a run for president, but he died early in 1862, so right in the middle, during the Civil War, he passed away. So Judge Pearce was a prominent white lawyer, and he, like many other towns in Chestertown, there were a number of them that, in that first couple of decades of 1900, realized that all the veterans of the war were passing away, and there was this surge in honoring whichever side you wanted to honor with statues and monuments. So that was Judge Pearce decided he would fund that. Now, he liked monuments for some reason. He's the same one who put the horse trough there, that big granite horse trough that's kind of sticks out from Fountain Park onto Cross Street. So he liked that. He spoke at the dedication of the fountain in 1899. So that was he got into the dedications and that kind of thing, and so he decided to do that in 1917, and he paid the full amount, I believe. He probably may have gotten help from some of his friends, but he basically funded the Civil War monument, and so he set that up and excluded the black soldiers. Well, I give him the benefit of the doubt. Did he do that on purpose, or was it just an oversight? Look at his life a little bit. So we know that his father was Senator Pearce. We know that Senator Pearce was a rabid pro-slaver. We know that from several things, not the least of which was some of the legislation he got involved in, in Washington. But he was also involved in the Bowers Affair in 1858, which was when a white Quaker man was tarred and feathered for helping slaves escape, and he said he didn't have any problem with that. Now, obviously, the judge grew up in his father's household. And he was born in 1840, so slaves were part of that. And I checked the slave census for James Pearce, the father, and he had numerous slaves. His house was the Hinson Ringgold house, interestingly enough. So you can picture the slaves in the Hinson Ringgold house. I'm sure you've seen it. And so James Jr. grew up in this environment where, slaves washed his clothes, cooked his meals, cleaned his room, and did all of that. So he grew up with that. That doesn't make him a racist by any means, but he had that exposure. He was born in 1840. I've said that a couple times. So he had the opportunity to own slaves, but I could find no records of him actually owning slaves. He was the defense attorney, one of the defense attorneys, pro bono attorneys, for the 8 men who were accused in the Dr. High Hill murder in 1892. He helped defend them. He was one of 2 local lawyers. And in retrospect, and I've checked with other lawyers, including state's attorneys and that kind of thing, they look at how that case was defended, and they are appalled at how it was defended. So I begin to question whether he was trying to help them or trying to, let's just say, calm the community or the white establishment, if I can pin it down a little better. So he didn't do a very good job with that. That doesn't make him a racist by any means. He certainly defended them. He didn't have a problem going through the motions in any case. So, but then we look at his wife. Now, his wife was a Raisin formerly. Eunice Raisin was her maiden name. And well, it turns out that her extended family, several of her cousins, were prominent in the Confederate Army. And one of them was Independence Raisin, who had quite a career. He was a captain, captured, imprisoned at Fort McHenry, escaped, and did some neat things that one of these days I'd like to write about it, to tell you the truth. Pretty interesting guy. But at the time that this monument went up, she was prominent in the Union of the Daughters of the Confederacy. That doesn't make Judge Pearce a racist by any means. He may have supported some of the philosophies of the Confederacy. A lot of locals did, because it was more than just slavery. It was a slave rights issue. So I mean, that doesn't make him racist. But did he know that those 400 black men served in the military or served in the Union forces? Well, of course he did. Of course he did. They would all have known that. All the government in Chestertown, in Kent County, they would have known that. It was a big deal. It was a big deal when the slaves got their freedom, because when the slaves did that, white farmers lost property. And that was a big deal. He might actually have defended some of the property owners to try to be compensated for the loss of their property. So he certainly knew about it. So if he knew about it and excluded them from the monument, then bottom line is he intentionally excluded the black soldiers. So that's a stain. That's a stain on Pearce. And if you think about it, it's a stain on the community, because this community waited, 1917 until about 1997 for the Parker White American Legion post, a black, primarily black American Legion members, put up the monument to the African American soldiers who fought in the war. And so does that make that monument wrong? I think that the fact that we have, number one, both sides represented on the monument, and then there's also a monument to the black soldiers, I think that kind of balances out a little bit.